What if the life of the royal family, the one the world watches with awe and fascination, was teetering on the edge of something darker than any scandal before? What if a plot so shocking had been brewing behind palace walls that it threatened not just public perception, but the safety of one of its most beloved members? Imagine discovering that someone you thought you knew, someone you trusted, could go to lengths so extreme that it would make even seasoned palace insiders recoil. This is not a hypothetical story. This is the shocking reality that has just emerged in one of the most explosive royal confrontations in recent history. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It all began with Prince Harry, a figure often seen as the rebel prince, the one who broke the mold of royal tradition. The world has followed him through his struggles, his public statements, his interviews, and his controversial departures from palace life. But nothing prepared anyone for the revelation he made behind closed doors, a revelation so chilling that it could reshape the dynamics of the monarchy forever. Harry, after months of quiet deliberation and immense personal conflict, made the decision to expose his wife Meghan Markle's alleged plot against Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge. What could possibly drive a man to betray the person he vowed to stand by? And what secrets were so damning that they could push him into taking this unprecedented step? The story is layered with intrigue, ambition, and what some are calling an escalation of royal rivalry into a territory that might best be described as dangerous. At the heart of this unfolding saga is Meghan Markle, a figure who has always been larger than life, whose ambitions have often been scrutinized, praised, and criticized in equal measure. But behind the headlines, beyond the public statements and the Instagram posts, a narrative is emerging, one that paints a picture of a woman who allegedly felt cornered, threatened, and willing to go to extreme measures to protect her empire. According to sources close to the palace, Meghan's ambition was not limited to the media and entertainment world. It extended into the domain of lifestyle branding, a field in which she had already made a significant mark. But when Catherine, calm, composed, and admired by millions, began planning a lifestyle brand of her own, the stakes changed dramatically. The alleged plot was simple in concept, but devastating in potential consequence. Meghan reportedly saw Catherine's brand as not just competition, but a threat capable of eclipsing her own ventures, threatening to dwarf the Duchess of Sussex's commercial empire. And when ambition meets fear, the result can be unpredictable. The palace sources allege that in private, Meghan expressed extreme intentions, including threats so severe that the walls of royal protocol could barely contain them. Catherine, unaware of the full scope of the threat, proceeded with her plans, confident in her integrity and the support of those closest to her. But Harry's intervention changed the trajectory entirely. Prince Harry's decision to act was not made lightly. For years, he had been caught in a complex web of loyalty and love, balancing his sense of duty with his allegiance to Meghan. Friends of the prince described sleepless nights, moral dilemmas, and intense personal reflection. Ultimately, Harry's choice to expose the alleged plot was a turning point, one that would not only bring Meghan under legal scrutiny, but also catalyze a series of reconciliations and reckonings within the monarchy itself. He reportedly reached out to King Charles and Prince William, explaining the situation in painstaking detail, revealing threats and ambitions that were previously unknown even to the highest levels of the royal household. The reaction, according to insiders, was one of shock, disbelief, and a sudden clarity about Meghan's true intentions. But what makes this story so compelling and so frightening is not just the revelation of the alleged plot itself. It's the human dimension behind it. Think about the weight of carrying such knowledge, the fear of confronting someone you love, and the moral imperative to protect another, even when it might cost you everything. Harry's story is not just one of betrayal. It is a story of courage, of moral reckoning, and of the painful choices that define the line between right and wrong. It is also a story that forces the public to question everything they thought they knew about the personalities involved. Is Meghan truly the ambitious, driven woman the world has celebrated, or does this plot reveal a darker edge, one that her public persona carefully conceals? And conversely, is Catherine simply a poised royal, Or does her rise reveal a resilience and strategic acumen that rivals any in modern history? As we delve deeper into this exposé, the layers of intrigue only multiply. The alleged threats, the brand rivalries, the whispers of palace aides, and the ultimate arrest of Meghan Markle all form a narrative that reads like a royal thriller. And yet, it is real, or at least as real as sources with access to palace insiders claim it to be. Each revelation creates tension, each disclosure adds stakes, and every new piece of information threatens to destabilize what the world perceives as a carefully managed monarchy. The very notion that one duchess could allegedly threaten another, that ambitions could escalate into life-altering consequences, is both fascinating and terrifying to the public eye. And the most shocking aspect? This story is unfolding right now, with real-time implications for the royal family, the media, and global audiences alike. To understand the full scope of what has transpired, we must consider the broader context of royal life in the modern era. The monarchy is no longer a secluded institution insulated from public scrutiny. Every action, every whisper, and every rumor is amplified by social media, analyzed by pundits, and dissected by millions. In this environment, the stakes of ambition and rivalry are magnified. A lifestyle brand is no longer just a business. It is a statement of power, influence, and status. And when two of the most visible and influential women in the world are operating in overlapping spaces, the tension becomes almost inevitable. But what happened behind palace walls goes beyond the typical rivalries or public disagreements. This is a narrative filled with high-stakes deception, moral conflict, and shocking threats that could have altered lives irreversibly. Now, imagine the moment when the palace, the media, and the public first learned of these events. The shockwaves would have been immediate. How does one reconcile the image of Meghan, the beloved duchess to many, with allegations of a plot so extreme? How does one interpret Harry's role as both a husband and a whistleblower? And what does it mean for Catherine, whose poised demeanor and calculated moves suddenly place her at the center of a dangerous conflict? These questions are not just rhetorical. They are central to understanding why this story has captured global attention. It is a tale that mixes family loyalty with ambition, personal vendettas with public duty, and moral courage with strategic calculation. As we begin to explore the chapters ahead, you will discover layers of betrayal, ambition, and reconciliation that read like a modern royal saga. You will witness how Harry's revelations prompted legal intervention, how Catherine navigated a landscape fraught with risk, and how Meghan's alleged plot unspooled in ways that no one could have predicted. You will also see the human dimension, the fear, the courage, the moral dilemmas, and the emotional stakes that underlie every headline. The story is rich with irony, contradictions, and moments that make the world question not just the monarchy, but human behavior itself. By the end of this video, you will understand why this is not just another royal scandal. This is a story that could redefine public perceptions, alter relationships within the monarchy, and raise questions about power, ambition, and accountability. And yet, even as we uncover the details, the most shocking revelations are still to come. The moments that will make your jaw drop, the twists that defy expectation, and the consequences that ripple through the highest echelons of power are only just beginning to unfold. And so, we start here, not at the arrest, not at the threats, but at the moment when choices were made, secrets were revealed, and the trajectory of a royal dynasty was forever altered. What drives a man to confront the people he has pledged his loyalty to in order to expose the woman he vowed to protect? This is not a question easily answered, but it is exactly what Prince Harry found himself grappling with in the weeks leading up to one of the most explosive revelations in recent royal history. For years, Harry had been portrayed as the black sheep, the misunderstood prince, the one who broke free of tradition to carve his own path. Yet behind the headlines and the public persona lay a story of a son caught between love, loyalty, and duty. A story that would lead him to make a decision with consequences that reverberated far beyond the palace walls. The tension began subtly. Observers noticed Harry's increasingly private behavior, the way he avoided public appearances with Meghan, the whispered conversations with aides that seemed more urgent than ever before. But the world had no idea what was happening behind closed doors, inside rooms protected by centuries of royal tradition and strict security. According to palace insiders, Harry reached a breaking point when he realized that the ambitions and actions of Meghan, his wife, had escalated beyond mere rivalry or personal grievance. They had become something potentially dangerous. The alleged threats toward Catherine, combined with Meghan's growing control over palace information, forced Harry into a position he could no longer ignore. The meeting itself was shrouded in secrecy. Harry reportedly sought an audience with King Charles and Prince William, navigating the complex web of royal protocol to get a private moment with his father and brother. Imagine the scene: a quiet corridor, the weight of history pressing down on everyone in the room, and a son about to reveal a truth that could shatter trust and family bonds. The air was thick with anticipation, tension that could almost be cut with a knife. The king, known for his measured composure, listened intently, while William, who had grown weary of public feuds and private conflicts, remained poised but wary. Harry began with the context. He recounted the evolution of Meghan's ambitions, framing her lifestyle brand not just as a commercial venture, but as a calculated move to consolidate influence, potentially at the expense of Catherine. He described the alleged threats, the moments of fear and intimidation that Catherine had faced without the public ever knowing. Every word was carefully weighed. Harry knew that one misstep could make him appear disloyal, untrustworthy, or even vindictive. Yet, he pressed on, driven by the moral imperative to protect his sister-in-law and, by extension, the integrity of the monarchy itself. As he spoke, the reactions in the room were mixed but intense. Charles, despite his experience with decades of palace intrigue, showed visible signs of shock. William's jaw tightened, a rare display of emotion that signaled the seriousness of the allegations. There was silence for a long, unbearable moment, the kind of silence that fills rooms before history is made. Then came the questions, the probing inquiries that reflected both disbelief and the need to understand every nuance. How credible were these threats? Could Meghan's ambitions really pose such a danger? And why had Harry waited so long to bring this forward? This meeting marked a turning point. Harry's confession was not simply a family intervention. It was a seismic event within the palace. By stepping forward, he altered the dynamics of loyalty and trust, forcing both his father and brother to reassess their assumptions about Meghan. According to insiders, the king and William quickly realized the gravity of the situation. Protective measures were discussed, palace aides were mobilized, and legal advisors were consulted. The atmosphere shifted from one of cautious listening to strategic planning. Decisions had to be made, and the consequences of inaction could no longer be ignored. Yet Harry's position was precarious. Publicly, he was still married, still bound by vows that required loyalty to Meghan. Privately, he was navigating a minefield of emotional complexity. Guilt for exposing his wife, fear for the potential fallout, and the moral responsibility to prevent harm. Friends of the prince describe late nights spent pacing in palace corridors, agonizing over every word, every possible scenario. Each conversation with Charles and William was a high-stakes negotiation, a delicate balance between truth, loyalty, and the inevitable media storm that would follow. Harry had become the fulcrum on which the fate of multiple lives now rested. The stakes extended beyond the palace. Royal aides, media contacts, and trusted confidants were quietly briefed, setting in motion a chain of events that would eventually culminate in Meghan's legal jeopardy. Each step Harry took was measured, strategic, and fraught with emotional tension. For someone so often portrayed as impulsive or rebellious, this was a calculated and deliberate act, an attempt to prevent a catastrophe while risking his own reputation and marriage. The irony was not lost on those closest to him. In trying to protect, he was also betraying, and in betraying, he might ultimately be saving lives. Meanwhile, Meghan remained unaware of the full scope of Harry's actions. Sources suggest she sensed a shift in his behavior, but could not anticipate the extent to which he would intervene. The alleged threats toward Catherine, combined with Meghan's ambitious maneuvers in the lifestyle and media domains, created a volatile situation. It was a powder keg, and Harry's disclosure was the spark that lit it. The palace, now armed with this knowledge, began preparing for contingencies that included everything from public relations strategies to legal action and personal security measures. What makes this moment so compelling and so fraught with tension is the convergence of personal loyalty and public duty. Harry was not acting as a whistleblower in the corporate sense. He was acting as a son, a brother, and a protector within an institution that operates under scrutiny far beyond anything ordinary people experience. Every decision was amplified, every word weighed against centuries of protocol, and every action carried the potential for scandal that could engulf the monarchy in ways previously unimaginable. The lines between personal morality and institutional responsibility blurred, leaving Harry in a space few could comprehend. As the meeting concluded, a sense of inevitability settled over the room. Decisions had to be made, strategies formulated, and the next steps carefully coordinated. Charles and William were now fully aware of what was at stake, not just for their family, but for the legacy of the monarchy itself. Harry, meanwhile, carried the weight of both revelation and consequence, acutely aware that his life, his marriage, and his public persona were forever altered. The private conversation that had begun with tension and apprehension now ended with plans and resolve, setting the stage for events that would soon captivate the world. And yet, even in this moment of strategic clarity, uncertainty lingered. Meghan's next move remained unknown, Catherine's response untested, and the public completely unaware of the storm building behind palace doors. Harry had acted, but the ripple effects of his revelation were just beginning to unfold. Every ally, every confidant, every member of the royal household would soon feel the consequences. Trust would be tested, relationships strained, and secrets exposed in ways that no one could predict. What drives someone to risk everything for ambition? For Meghan Markle, according to palace insiders, it wasn't just the pursuit of influence or recognition. It was a calculated quest to dominate a world she had carefully chosen, the lifestyle and media domain. From the moment she entered the royal spotlight, Meghan's public persona suggested elegance, poise, and determination. Behind the headlines, however, sources allege a woman intensely focused on building an empire that would extend far beyond charity work or royal appearances. This chapter explores the alleged blueprint of Meghan's ambition, the stakes involved, and the consequences when another influential royal entered the same arena. Meghan's interest in lifestyle branding was reportedly more than a hobby. It was a strategic move to establish her authority, not just as a duchess, but as a cultural and commercial powerhouse. Friends and advisors describe her as meticulous, noting that she approached the industry like a chess player. Every partnership, every appearance, every endorsement calculated to build credibility and influence. By leveraging her public profile and global recognition, Meghan was positioned to create a brand that could reach millions and generate influence far beyond traditional royal channels. Her vision reportedly included everything from fashion and wellness to media content and digital platforms, an interconnected empire that would cement her as a leading figure in modern culture. But the ambitions of one duchess inevitably collided with the natural aspirations of another. Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, while historically understated in commercial pursuits, had begun exploring her own lifestyle initiatives. Palace insiders describe Catherine's approach as methodical, focused on long-term sustainability rather than immediate impact. Yet her emerging brand posed an unexpected threat to Meghan. According to sources, Meghan allegedly viewed Catherine's venture not as a friendly or neutral endeavor, but as a challenge capable of undermining her influence. In private discussions, Meghan reportedly expressed frustration and anxiety over the potential of being overshadowed, signaling that her ambitions were deeply personal and intimately tied to her sense of identity and status. The tension escalated further when advisors noted Meghan's increasing control over media narratives and public perception. Her strategy was reportedly multi-layered. Crafting compelling content, securing high-profile endorsements, and cultivating a loyal following while subtly shaping the conversation around royal influence. Every announcement, every public engagement, and every social media post was measured for impact. Catherine, though operating in her own sphere, suddenly represented a rival in a landscape Meghan considered exclusively hers. The perceived rivalry, according to insiders, was less about personal dislike and more about strategic dominance. A battle for the symbolic and commercial crown within the royal household. Palace aides also highlighted the emotional undercurrents fueling Meghan's actions. While ambition alone could explain some of her decisions, sources suggest that fear, insecurity, and the pressure of public scrutiny amplified her responses. The fear of being eclipsed by Catherine, combined with intense media attention, allegedly prompted Meghan to take extreme measures. This is where the narrative turns from professional rivalry to personal crisis. When ambition meets perceived threat, decision-making can become unpredictable, impulsive, and, in some cases, dangerous. Moreover, Meghan's ambitions were reportedly entwined with her public identity and legacy. To insiders, she wasn't merely pursuing a brand. She was striving for permanence, a lasting mark on the cultural landscape. This ambition, however, came with unintended consequences. Every move she made was scrutinized, interpreted, and often amplified. Allies who might have acted as advisors reportedly found themselves in a difficult position. How to support her vision without condoning behaviors that threatened the well-being of others, including Catherine. The inner circle became a minefield of loyalty, strategy, and moral judgment. The alleged threats directed toward Catherine, as disclosed by Prince Harry, stemmed directly from this high-stakes ambition. According to sources, Meghan feared that Catherine's lifestyle brand could not only rival but dwarf her own efforts, potentially redefining the power dynamics within the royal family and in the public eye. What makes this revelation especially dramatic is that it reveals a side of Meghan rarely seen in public, one where ambition and fear intersect in ways that challenge conventional perceptions of royalty. It is not just about commercial success. It is about status, influence, and the control of narrative. The stakes, in Meghan's eyes, were existential. Palace insiders also describe a pattern of strategic maneuvering in Meghan's approach. Every public engagement was evaluated for its potential to enhance her image. Every collaboration measured against its potential to elevate her brand above Catherine's emerging presence. According to reports, this strategy extended into private interactions as well, with Meghan allegedly leveraging information, alliances, and influence in ways that heightened tension within the palace. The pressure, scrutiny, and competition created a volatile environment, one in which missteps could have profound personal and professional consequences. Despite these tensions, Meghan's ambitions were undeniably formidable. She had cultivated a global presence, built relationships with media and entertainment figures, and engaged in strategic philanthropy that enhanced her credibility. From a purely professional perspective, she was operating at a level few royals ever reach, blending modern celebrity influence with traditional royal visibility. The challenge, according to insiders, was that this level of ambition, when coupled with fear of being eclipsed, could create destructive outcomes, particularly when perceived threats emerged from within the family itself. And this is precisely where the drama escalated. Catherine's measured approach, her poise, and her growing public admiration suddenly became more than a friendly rivalry. They became a perceived existential threat to Meghan's empire. The alleged plot to undermine or intimidate Catherine, which Harry would later reveal, can be traced back to this clash of ambition and fear. It is a classic narrative. When personal stakes are perceived to be high, rational decision-making can give way to desperation. And in the highly scrutinized world of royalty, desperation becomes dangerous. Yet, amidst the tension, there is an irony that cannot be ignored. Meghan, the woman often celebrated for her independence and vision, found herself entangled in a web of control, power, and rivalry that mirrored the very pressures she had publicly criticized within royal structures. Her ambition, while bold and strategic, also exposed vulnerabilities, emotional, relational, and reputational. The very tools she used to elevate her brand, visibility, influence, media savvy, became the instruments through which potential exposure and consequence would arrive. In other words, the empire she sought to protect and expand also set the stage for the very crisis that would culminate in legal intervention. The juxtaposition of Meghan's ambition and the looming threat of Catherine's brand underscores the high stakes. It was no longer a friendly competition between two duchesses. It was a strategic, high-risk conflict with personal, professional, and potentially legal consequences. Every advisor, every palace aide, and every family member who witnessed this unfolding scenario understood that the stakes were unprecedented. In the past, royal rivalries might have played out in public perception or private tension. This, however, had escalated into a confrontation with real-world implications, one that would force Prince Harry into the role of mediator, protector, and ultimately whistleblower. As we look at Meghan's lifestyle empire ambition, we see not just a story of branding and influence, but a story of human psychology under extreme pressure. Fear, status, and ambition converge to create an environment ripe for conflict. And while the world outside watched only the surface, media appearances, charity work, and curated social posts, the palace experienced the intensity of these ambitions in real time, with real-world consequences. It is in this convergence that the narrative becomes truly compelling. Ambition, rivalry, and fear collide, creating a chain reaction that will forever alter the dynamics of the royal family. What happens when ambition crosses a line into menace? In the halls of the palace, whispers of tension had been growing for months, but nothing could have prepared insiders for what allegedly came next. A threat so severe, so unprecedented, that it shook the foundations of trust, loyalty, and safety within the royal household. According to sources close to the family, Meghan Markle's ambition, already a source of quiet concern, escalated into behavior that was not only alarming but potentially dangerous. The alleged threat directed toward Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, is the moment when rivalry reportedly morphed into fear, and where Prince Harry found himself facing the impossible decision of choosing between love and moral responsibility. It began subtly. According to palace insiders, Meghan's frustration over Catherine's emerging lifestyle brand had reached a boiling point. Initially, the tension was expressed in passive ways. Dismissive comments, pointed remarks in private meetings, and strategic maneuvers in public engagements meant to draw attention away from Catherine's initiatives. But soon, what had started as professional rivalry allegedly evolved into something more sinister. Meghan's words, overheard by aides and recorded in confidential notes, reportedly included veiled threats aimed at undermining, intimidating, and in extreme accounts, controlling the actions of her sister-in-law. The alleged nature of the threat stunned palace officials. Sources indicate that Meghan allegedly warned Catherine that her new lifestyle brand could have serious consequences if it moved forward, implying that the brand's success, or even its mere existence, would not be tolerated. While the palace had experienced internal disagreements and rivalries before, nothing on record suggested that one royal would threaten another's well-being in such a direct and personal manner. The tension was compounded by Meghan's public persona, a duchess admired worldwide for her composure, intelligence, and activism. The dichotomy between her public image and the alleged private threats created an emotional shockwave throughout the palace, leaving aides and family members alike questioning the extent of her ambition and the potential for real danger. Prince Harry, who had long been navigating a precarious middle ground, was suddenly forced to confront the reality of these allegations. For years, he had remained loyal, often defending Meghan against criticism and attempting to mediate conflicts behind closed doors. But when the alleged threats became explicit, Harry's role shifted from protector to whistleblower. Friends of the prince describe a profound internal conflict. A sense of duty to his wife, combined with a moral obligation to safeguard Catherine, created sleepless nights, intense reflection, and eventual resolve. He reportedly agonized over the potential consequences for all parties involved: the damage to his marriage, the impact on the royal family's reputation, and the safety of Catherine herself. The alleged threats were not mere words. They represented a strategic understanding of power dynamics and the leverage that Meghan believed she held. Palace insiders claim that Meghan understood the influence she wielded in shaping media narratives, public perception, and even internal palace decisions. By allegedly framing her opposition as a threat, she reportedly sought to assert dominance in a space where Catherine's calm, steady approach posed a challenge. What made the situation so alarming was that Meghan was not acting in isolation. Her advisors, friends, and aides were implicated, knowingly or unknowingly, in facilitating or amplifying the pressure on Catherine. The layers of influence created an environment in which fear and intimidation reportedly became instruments of strategy rather than just side effects of rivalry. Catherine, for her part, remained poised and resolute. Sources describe her response as measured, deliberate, and guided by a keen understanding of both public perception and internal dynamics. She reportedly documented every interaction, consulted trusted advisors, and took steps to ensure that her personal and professional endeavors would proceed despite the looming pressure. This calm approach, however, allegedly only fueled Meghan's frustration. To a mind consumed by ambition and fear of being overshadowed, Catherine's resilience may have been interpreted as defiance, a provocation that required further intervention, according to insiders. The palace's response to the alleged threats was swift, strategic, and confidential. Security protocols were reviewed, advisors were briefed, and contingency plans were developed. Legal counsel was consulted, although the full scope of action was not yet publicly disclosed. What made the situation especially delicate was the need to balance privacy, public image, and safety. In the world of royalty, where every decision is scrutinized, the revelation of conflict, even internally, can have ramifications that ripple across media, government, and public opinion. The stakes were immense, and every decision carried potential consequences that extended far beyond the immediate family. Psychologically, the alleged threats represent a fascinating intersection of ambition, fear, and perceived power. Meghan, according to insiders, was operating under intense pressure to protect her brand, her reputation, and her sense of control within the royal sphere. Catherine, by contrast, was navigating her own trajectory with strategic poise, inadvertently becoming the focal point of Meghan's perceived rivalry. Harry's intervention underscores the human complexity of this drama. Caught between loyalty and moral responsibility, he was thrust into a role few could anticipate, a mediator forced to make decisions with life-altering implications. As these dynamics unfolded, the tension extended beyond private spaces. Media speculation, although not yet aware of the full story, began to sense subtle shifts. Meghan's public appearances, once celebrated, now carried undercurrents of intensity, calculation, and perhaps even desperation. Observers noticed changes in her demeanor, interactions, and messaging, subtle signs that those closest to palace life recognized as indicators of rising stress and possible overreach. The perception of internal conflict, combined with the looming threat narrative, created a pressure cooker environment in which every action could have cascading consequences. It is important to note that the alleged threat, while shocking, also underscores the very human vulnerabilities that exist even among the most visible and scrutinized figures. Fear of being overshadowed, anxiety about public perception, and the intense desire for influence are universal motivators. But in the context of royalty, where visibility is extreme and consequences amplified, these motivators can lead to high-stakes conflict with extraordinary repercussions. Meghan's alleged actions, therefore, must be understood not just as personal behavior, but as a reflection of the pressures and dynamics unique to modern monarchy. In the midst of this tension, Harry's role became increasingly central. As he weighed his loyalty against the potential for harm, he began to understand that inaction could result in consequences far worse than the personal or marital cost of speaking out. According to palace insiders, this moral calculus, balancing love, duty, and ethics, led him to a decisive moment: the disclosure of Meghan's alleged threats to King Charles and Prince William. This disclosure would ultimately set the stage for legal scrutiny, family reconciliation, and public fascination on a scale few could have imagined. The alleged threat also illuminates broader questions about power, influence, and responsibility. In a family accustomed to public scrutiny, how does one navigate private conflict without compromising integrity? How can ambition coexist with empathy and restraint? And when personal stakes intersect with institutional obligations, who bears the responsibility for preventing escalation? These questions are not just rhetorical. They are central to understanding why this chapter of royal history is so gripping, so unprecedented, and so fraught with moral complexity. Catherine's calm and measured approach, Harry's difficult moral decision, and Meghan's ambitious, allegedly threatening behavior combined to create a perfect storm within the palace. Each element amplified the others, creating a narrative filled with tension, unpredictability, and drama. For the world outside, unaware of the full details, this conflict would eventually manifest in headlines, speculation, and public debate. But within the palace, it represented a crisis of trust, loyalty, and personal safety. And yet, even as the palace braced for the fallout, the full consequences of the alleged threats were only beginning to unfold. Legal action, media attention, and familial reckoning were imminent, and every decision made in the coming days would carry weight far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. The stage was set for the next chapter in this unfolding saga, a chapter that would reveal not just the ambitions and fears of Meghan Markle, but the courage, resilience, and moral clarity of those determined to prevent catastrophe. How does a man choose between loyalty to love and loyalty to truth? For Prince Harry, that question became a defining moment, one that would not only alter the trajectory of his personal life, but also reshape the inner dynamics of the royal family. For years, Harry had been cast as the dutiful husband, the protective partner standing by Meghan Markle through public criticism, media scrutiny, and palace pressures. But when allegations of a plot against Catherine surfaced, when threats crossed the line from ambition to potential danger, Harry found himself standing at a crossroads: continue to protect his wife, or step forward to expose the truth, no matter the personal cost. The decision was anything but simple. Sources close to the prince describe long nights filled with moral conflict, sleepless pacing through palace corridors, and a relentless inner dialogue weighing consequences against ethics. Harry was not naive. He understood that by speaking out, he risked the collapse of his marriage, the wrath of Meghan, and public backlash. Yet, he also recognized that inaction could place Catherine, and potentially others, at risk. Friends recount his agonizing deliberation. He repeatedly asked himself whether silence was complicity, and whether loyalty could be defined without honesty. When the day finally came for Harry to act, he reportedly approached the conversation with his father, King Charles, and his brother, Prince William, with measured precision. The scene was described by palace aides as tense, emotionally charged, and unprecedented. Harry entered a room filled with historical gravitas, knowing that what he was about to reveal could fracture relationships, invite scrutiny, and potentially ignite public controversy. Yet, he proceeded, guided by an unwavering sense of moral duty. He began by framing the context: the escalation of Meghan's ambition, the emergence of Catherine's lifestyle brand as a perceived threat, and the alleged warnings and intimidation directed toward his sister-in-law. Every word was deliberate, every detail meticulously recounted, with an awareness that miscommunication could render his testimony ineffective, or worse, misinterpreted. According to insiders, Harry's voice wavered at times, revealing the emotional toll of betrayal and the weight of truth. He acknowledged the complexity of the situation, the love he had for Meghan, the respect he held for Catherine, and the responsibilities inherent in his role within the monarchy. The impact of Harry's confession was immediate and profound. King Charles, known for his composure, was reportedly taken aback by the gravity of the allegations. Prince William's reaction was more visible, tension etched across his face, jaw clenched, eyes narrowing in concentration. Neither could ignore the implications. If the allegations were true, Meghan's actions constituted not only a breach of personal trust, but a potential threat to safety and the stability of the royal family's public standing. The conversation reportedly stretched for hours, with probing questions, clarifications, and intense deliberation. What exactly had Meghan said? How credible were the threats? What evidence existed to substantiate the claims? Every query added another layer to the already complex moral and logistical challenge. Harry's disclosure was not merely a recounting of alleged threats. It was a moral appeal. He emphasized his intention to protect, not punish, and his hope that by revealing the truth, the family could intervene before the situation escalated further. In doing so, he shifted his role from passive protector to active whistleblower, taking on a burden few could imagine. Sources describe a moment of near silence after Harry's recounting, a pause in which the weight of his words settled across the room, punctuated by the realization that the status quo was no longer sustainable. Friends and advisors close to Harry recount the personal toll of this act. The prince reportedly felt an overwhelming mix of guilt, fear, and resolve. Guilt for potentially betraying Meghan, fear for the personal and public consequences, and resolve to prevent harm. This internal struggle underscores the human complexity of the situation. Harry was neither hero nor villain in the conventional sense, but a man navigating extraordinary circumstances with extraordinary consequences. His choice highlights a fundamental tension between love and duty, between loyalty and morality, a tension that resonates far beyond the gilded walls of the palace. The aftermath of Harry's confession set into motion a series of calculated responses. Legal advisors were consulted, security measures were reviewed, and a carefully orchestrated plan was put in place to address the alleged threats. The palace, recognizing the unprecedented nature of the situation, moved quickly to balance discretion with action. Meanwhile, Harry was forced to contend with the personal ramifications. The strain on his marriage, the potential alienation of allies, and the intense media scrutiny that awaited once the story inevitably leaked to the public. One of the most compelling aspects of Harry's decision was the ethical calculus involved. By stepping forward, he risked everything he had built with Meghan, including the personal bond, public image, and private life they had shared. As the story spread within palace circles, allies began to mobilize. Confidential channels buzzed with planning, how to address Meghan, how to protect Catherine, and how to manage the inevitable public fallout. The situation was evolving rapidly, with each hour bringing new calculations, alliances, and strategies. The palace had moved from quiet tension to active crisis management, with Harry at the center as both catalyst and mediator. The confession also carried a psychological weight for Harry. Sources note that the prince had long been under immense public pressure, navigating scrutiny, criticism, and personal trauma. The revelation of Meghan's alleged threats added another layer of emotional intensity, forcing him to confront complex feelings of betrayal, responsibility, and protective instinct. It is a rare glimpse into the human side of royalty, where decisions carry consequences not just for personal relationships, but for public trust, institutional stability, and historical legacy. Harry's act of whistleblowing would have ramifications far beyond the immediate family. By revealing the alleged plot, he triggered legal review, palace intervention, and a chain of events that would eventually lead to Meghan's arrest. At the same time, his disclosure created opportunities for reconciliation, with King Charles, with Prince William, and potentially with Catherine. It also underscored the high stakes of modern royalty, where personal ambition, media scrutiny, and family dynamics collide in ways that demand difficult moral choices. The tension, however, was far from over. Meghan remained largely unaware of the full extent of Harry's actions. How she would respond, whether with denial, confrontation, or strategic maneuvering, remained uncertain. Meanwhile, Catherine, poised and composed, continued to move forward with her initiatives, unaware of the full scope of the threat she had narrowly avoided. And Harry, standing between love and duty, watched as the ripple effects of his confession began to unfold, knowing that every action Irene's brand plans. Innocent or provocative, what happens when ambition is met with ambition? Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, has long been admired for her poise, intellect, and methodical approach to public life. While Meghan Markle's ambitions had been aggressive, high-profile, and strategically calculated, Catherine's initiatives were quietly strategic, grounded in long-term vision and personal values. But when news of her emerging lifestyle brand reached palace insiders, and, eventually, Meghan, what had begun as a measured professional endeavor allegedly became a catalyst for one of the most explosive internal conflicts in recent royal history. Catherine's approach to her brand, according to sources close to her team, was deliberate and thoughtful. Unlike Meghan, who allegedly sought rapid expansion and media dominance, Catherine focused on authenticity, sustainability, and long-term influence. Her vision reportedly encompassed home, wellness, and family-centered initiatives. projects that would resonate with millions without overtly seeking to overshadow or compete with Meghan's ventures. In essence, Catherine's strategy was less about confrontation and more about carving a unique space within the lifestyle and cultural landscape. Yet, in the world of high-stakes ambition, perception is everything. While Catherine's efforts were measured, Meghan allegedly perceived them as a direct challenge. Sources claim that Meghan viewed Catherine's brand not just as competition, but as a potential threat capable of dwarfing her own commercial ventures. The irony, according to insiders, was that Catherine's modest approach, a brand grounded in lifestyle authenticity rather than media spectacle, was precisely what made it a threat in Meghan's eyes. In a world where public perception dictates influence, subtlety can be as powerful as spectacle. The palace became acutely aware of the tensions as whispers of Meghan's frustration grew louder. Advisors noted subtle exchanges, pointed remarks, and strategic attempts to influence public narratives, suggesting that Meghan was concerned about being overshadowed. Catherine, by contrast, remained focused on her work, consulting with trusted advisors, and meticulously planning her brand rollout. According to insiders, she was unaware of the full scope of Meghan's alleged displeasure, believing at the time that any tension was minor and manageable. The dynamics between the two duchesses were further complicated by public perception and media scrutiny. Catherine, widely admired for her composure and relatability, had built a loyal following over years of careful public engagement. Meghan, known for her charisma and modern celebrity appeal, had cultivated her own audience, often more global than domestic. In theory, the two brands could coexist without conflict, occupying distinct spheres of influence. In practice, however, Meghan allegedly perceived Catherine's rise as a zero-sum game, where any success for Catherine was a loss for her own empire. Palace insiders suggest that Meghan's response to Catherine's brand became increasingly strategic and, allegedly, extreme. Reports indicate that she may have used private channels to express disapproval, exert influence, and even issue warnings. These actions, according to Prince Harry's later disclosures, escalated to the point of personal threats, an alarming intersection of professional rivalry and personal intimidation. The alleged intensity of Meghan's reaction underscores the volatility inherent when ambition is coupled with fear, perception of threat, and high-stakes visibility. Catherine's response, as described by sources, was measured and professional. She continued her planning, documented interactions, and sought counsel from advisors regarding potential risks. Her approach reflected both confidence and caution, confidence in her vision, and caution in navigating a complex network of palace relationships and public scrutiny. The contrast between Meghan's allegedly reactive, high-pressure approach and Catherine's strategic, grounded method highlights a central tension in this narrative: the collision of ambition and perception, and the consequences when private rivalry escalates into public consequence. Interestingly, the very subtlety of Catherine's plans may have contributed to the volatility. Where Meghan's brand strategy was overt, attention-grabbing, and rapidly expanding, Catherine's initiatives were gradual, emphasizing authenticity over spectacle. Yet this deliberate pacing, instead of defusing tension, allegedly amplified it. Perceived by Meghan as a slow encroachment, a quiet challenge to her influence, and a direct test of her status within the royal ecosystem. In this sense, Catherine's innocence, her careful, thoughtful brand development, paradoxically became a flashpoint for conflict. Advisors to Catherine reportedly encouraged discretion, documentation, and strategic communication. They emphasized the importance of focusing on long-term goals rather than reacting to perceived threats. Catherine's measured approach, however, could not fully insulate her from Meghan's alleged actions. According to insiders, this dynamic, the collision of perception, ambition, and rivalry, set the stage for the dramatic events that would soon erupt, involving legal scrutiny, palace intervention, and unprecedented public attention. The situation reached a tipping point when Prince Harry, aware of Meghan's allegedly escalating behavior, recognized that silence was no longer an option. Catherine's brand, innocuous by public standards, had become the catalyst for private conflict with the potential for serious consequences. Harry's intervention, as previously detailed, was both protective and morally necessary. A move to prevent the situation from escalating further while balancing the complexities of loyalty, love, and family duty. In the broader context, Catherine's brand initiatives highlight the intricate balancing act of modern royalty. Public scrutiny, personal ambition, and institutional expectations converge in ways that create both opportunity and risk. For Catherine, the stakes were not merely commercial. They were emblematic of her growing influence within the monarchy, her ability to navigate high-profile initiatives responsibly, and her resilience in the face of internal pressure. For Meghan, the perceived threat underscored the fragility of status and control, revealing the lengths to which ambition and fear could intersect in dramatic and potentially dangerous ways. The clash of these ambitions. The understated and authentic versus the high-profile and expansive represents a microcosm of human behavior under pressure. Fear of being overshadowed, desire for dominance, and strategic calculation converge to produce tension that can escalate unpredictably. For the royal family, this was not an abstract concept. It was a real-time crisis, one that required careful navigation, decisive action, and constant vigilance. As Catherine continued her planning, unaware of the full scope of Meghan's alleged threats, the stage was set for a confrontation that would redefine alliances, challenge loyalties, and test the moral compass of everyone involved. The tension between perceived innocence and alleged provocation would become the fulcrum upon which the next phase of this drama turned, creating a narrative filled with suspense, moral complexity, and high-stakes consequences. What happens when private conflict becomes a matter for the law? Until now, the tension between Meghan Markle and Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, had existed largely behind palace walls, obscured from public scrutiny. But according to palace insiders, what had been a series of private threats and strategic maneuvers began escalating into legal territory, a development that would ultimately trigger unprecedented consequences. Prince Harry's disclosure of Meghan's alleged threat against Catherine catalyzed a chain reaction, prompting palace legal advisors and external counsel to examine potential legal recourse, risk assessment, and security protocols. The moment of legal reckoning reportedly began quietly. Confidential memos circulated within the palace legal team, documenting incidents, potential breaches of law, and the possible exposure of individuals involved. Sources indicate that the team was tasked with determining whether Meghan's alleged threats could be classified as criminal behavior, including intimidation or harassment, under applicable law. The challenge was enormous. The palace operates under a unique combination of tradition, privacy, and constitutional oversight, meaning that any legal action would require precision, discretion, and strategic foresight. Meanwhile, Catherine's advisors reportedly compiled detailed records of her interactions and communications, emphasizing the importance of establishing an evidence trail. Every meeting, message, and encounter was reviewed for potential relevance, ensuring that any legal actions could be supported with documentation. The goal, according to insiders, was not to escalate conflict unnecessarily, but to provide a protective framework. A legal safety net that would deter further threats and safeguard the Duchess's personal and professional interests. The palace's legal strategy, as described by insiders, involved multiple layers. First, there was an assessment of immediate risk, ensuring Catherine's physical and psychological safety. Second, there was a review of potential civil or criminal liability for Meghan, examining whether her alleged statements could meet the threshold for law enforcement intervention. Third, there was coordination with security personnel to monitor potential escalation, ensuring that any response could be executed swiftly and effectively. Together, these measures represented an unprecedented fusion of royal protocol, legal strategy, and personal protection. According to sources, the legal team's recommendations included preparing a formal warning to Meghan, outlining the seriousness of her alleged behavior and the potential consequences under law. The warning reportedly emphasized that any further threats could result in immediate intervention, including arrest and prosecution, should law enforcement become involved. The unprecedented nature of this action sent shockwaves through palace circles. Never before had a senior member of the royal family faced such direct legal scrutiny, stemming from alleged personal threats. Prince Harry's role in this phase was pivotal. By providing detailed accounts of Meghan's alleged actions, he gave the legal team critical insight into both motive and behavior. His testimony, combined with evidence compiled by Catherine's advisors, created a scenario in which legal measures could be considered credible and enforceable. Sources describe Harry's internal conflict as profound. While he was facilitating legal intervention against his wife, he also carried the burden of protecting her privacy, reputation, and personal well-being. It was a delicate balance, a high-stakes moral calculus in which every action had consequences for multiple parties. The palace's legal advisors reportedly consulted extensively with outside counsel to assess the threshold for intervention. What constituted a credible threat? How could documentation and witness statements support action without provoking undue public scandal? Could internal palace measures suffice, or was law enforcement involvement necessary? These questions, seemingly technical, carried immense weight. Any misstep could ignite media frenzy, compromise royal reputation, or undermine trust within the family. The complexity of legal maneuvering within the royal context is staggering, as it combines statutory law, institutional precedent, and centuries of unspoken protocol. As preparations continued, Meghan allegedly remained largely unaware of the full scope of the legal and protective measures being organized. Sources indicate that the initial warning was designed to be discreet yet authoritative, delivered through legal channels to underscore the seriousness of her alleged actions. The goal was not confrontation, but prevention, a chance to de-escalate, correct behavior, and avoid public scandal or criminal consequences. It was a pivotal moment, a final attempt to contain a situation that had spiraled far beyond private disagreement. Observers outside the palace, of course, were unaware of the legal undercurrents. Media coverage at the time focused on public appearances, charitable engagements, and the subtle optics of royal family life. But within palace walls, legal maneuvering had become the central concern, shaping decisions about public statements, security, and familial interactions. Every step was calculated, every communication reviewed, and every possible scenario considered. The stakes were higher than ever. Failure to act decisively could endanger Catherine, compromise Harry's integrity, or escalate the situation into a full-blown scandal with international ramifications. In addition to formal legal preparation, palace security reportedly conducted risk assessments, anticipating potential retaliation or escalation. Meghan's global influence, her network of allies, and her media savvy added layers of complexity. Any response had to consider not just immediate safety, but long-term reputational consequences, both for Catherine and for the institution of the monarchy. The fusion of legal strategy and security planning represented a highly coordinated effort, unprecedented in recent royal history, reflecting the seriousness of the alleged threat. The culmination of these efforts reportedly led to the issuance of a formal warning, an extraordinary step within royal protocol. Insiders describe the moment as tense, carefully orchestrated, and laden with emotion. Legal teams, security advisors, and key family members monitored the situation closely, knowing that Meghan's response could determine the trajectory of subsequent events. The warning was intended to be unequivocal. Further escalation would not be tolerated, and legal consequences, including arrest, were a real and enforceable possibility. This stage of the crisis illustrates the convergence of personal rivalry, public visibility, and legal accountability. Meghan's alleged ambition had crossed into territory that required intervention beyond private mediation, demonstrating that even royalty is not exempt from the rule of law. At the same time, the careful orchestration of legal and protective measures reflects the intricate balance the palace must maintain between family loyalty, public perception, and personal safety. Yet, even as these measures were implemented, uncertainty remained. How would Meghan respond? Would she comply, deny, or escalate? How would the public narrative evolve once news of the legal warning and potential arrest leaked? And most importantly, could the palace navigate this unprecedented crisis without irreparably fracturing family relationships? The answers remained unknown, setting the stage for a dramatic escalation in the saga. How does someone respond when confronted with the possibility of legal consequences for their actions? For Meghan Markle, the alleged warning from palace legal teams did not result in immediate compliance. Instead, sources indicate a complex blend of defiance, strategic maneuvering, and calculated messaging that would further escalate the tension within the royal family. While the world continued to see Meghan's poised public appearances behind palace walls, insiders describe a series of actions and decisions that reveal a side of the Duchess rarely captured in public narratives. A side defined by ambition, resolve, and the high-stakes calculus of influence. According to palace sources, Meghan's initial reaction was disbelief. Reports suggest that she struggled to reconcile the notion that her private behavior, long guided by advisors and framed within her vision of brand development, could provoke legal scrutiny and potentially even an arrest warning. Insiders describe intense private conversations, where Meghan reportedly expressed frustration at being misunderstood or misrepresented by palace authorities. This response, while emotionally charged, also revealed a strategic element. She sought to position herself as both a victim of misunderstanding and a figure whose intentions were noble, albeit misinterpreted. The defiance was subtle but calculated. Meghan allegedly continued her public appearances and brand-related initiatives without overtly acknowledging the palace warning. Friends close to the Duchess describe her demeanor as composed on the surface, but laser-focused beneath, a careful balance of visibility, influence, and messaging designed to maintain authority while protecting her public image. According to insiders, Meghan's communications, both internal and external, were deliberately structured to project confidence and resilience, signaling that she was neither intimidated nor constrained, even as legal scrutiny loomed. At the same time, Meghan reportedly engaged in strategic maneuvers to consolidate support and influence.